If you are part of the memoir method, you have no doubt heard Emily and I say the phrase, truth is more important than fact. But for those of you who are not part of the program, I wanted to bring this into a conversation on today's video because I think this is a crucial thing to remember no matter what your memoir is about. We have to make sure that you are getting to the truth of the matter without getting too hung up on what the individual tiny little details are that are not important and can derail you. So stay tuned if you want to hear about how accurate you need to be as you're writing your memoir.
If you're writing a memoir, but you're not sure where to start, and let's face it, you're not really sure where you're going after you do get started, then you are not alone. Not having a plan for your memoir is one of the most common reasons I see that people fall off of these projects that they care about so deeply. And that's why my team created the Memoir Method Checklist. This absolutely free download is going to take you through every single step along with the timeline, all the way from your seed of an idea all the way through holding that beautiful book in your hands. And you can download it at pageandpodium.com/checklist. Happy writing.
So today's video comes from a question that was sent in by one of our subscribers. So shout out to Claire, who asked how accurate you need to be as you're thinking about the historical moments in your memoir. Now, this, of course, is harder the longer ago you are writing about, right? If we are writing about something that was just a couple of years ago, we can often kind of dig up on social media or wherever. We can find all of the specific details. And in fact, as I'll talk about later, that can be a really great way to actually add a lot of depth and richness to your memoir. But what if you're writing about a time that is longer ago, a time before social media, even maybe a time before you have records? How do you deal with the historical facts and how important are they to getting your ideas across? So today I want to get into why it is that the truth matters more than facts and what we even mean by that. So let's start by just defining both of those terms, facts versus truth. So a fact is, by definition, a thing that is known or proved to be true. Now, if you think about how someone would go about proving something true or not, it makes sense that actually facts tend to be pretty specific, right? The more general we get, the easier it is for someone to come along and say, well, okay, that's true in some cases, but in other cases, I don't know, it might be different, right? And in that case, then we can't prove that thing true, right? The larger the case, the more chances for variability there are. So with facts, we're thinking of very, very specific things. Now, truth, on the other hand, is the real body of things, events, and facts. Now, of course, we get super confused here because when I was talking about facts, I used the word truth. Now we're talking about truth. We're using the word facts here. But there is a pretty crucial distinction here. So with facts, remember, we're thinking about what is provable, what we can make a case for, what we can, ask 10 people on the street, and they're all going to agree that we are correct. With truth, the piece of the definition that I really want you to hold on to is that feeling of real, which is right at the beginning of that definition, right? So what I want you to hold on to about that definition is this idea of real. And what does real mean? Because whereas facts are something very, very specific, often what we feel is real is much more general, much more abstract, and really much more subjective, right? So what we're talking about here really is facts on the one hand, which are very objective. They have to be. To be a fact, it must be at least relatively objective, right? Versus truth, which is entirely subjective. What is real to me may not seem real at all to you. And I want to give you an example because I think this can really kind of help us tease out what we're looking at when we think about the difference between truth and fact. So the example I want to use is the experience of sexism. Now, if you are a person that talks about any kind of discrimination or any of the isms on a regular basis, you know that the more specific you are, the less likely there are arguments, but people will find things to argue about no matter what, right? But I think that actually makes this a really good example. So let's say I'm going to talk about how sexism works in careers and the workplace and that kind of thing. Well, one thing that I might go to are the statistics, right? So I might say the average woman is paid 16% less than the average man in the same job. It's a pretty well-known statistic, right? Now, it's not that specific, right? Because if we actually look at who is the average woman, it kind of becomes clear that that's probably too broad a brush, because we have women of color, we have women with disabilities, we have fat women, we have all different types of women that are going to be in this same pool, but that we know have different levels of pay discrimination, right? Women of color are much lower, and even within women of color, right, there are Black women, Latina women, etc., that all of those numbers are a little bit different. So while we know that that statistic is a fact because we used that word average, right? We're pointing to the specificity. We also can dig in there and get even more specific. We can get as specific as we want to. And the more specific we get, the more difficult it is for someone to make a credible argument against it. This is provable, right? The studies that resulted in this statistic are methodologically sound. They are things that were run by people who are trained to work in statistics. We can trust these facts. They're provable, right? But for most of us, that statistic, first of all, I think we've probably heard that before, but also for most of us, that really doesn't capture what the experience is, right? You can be discriminated at work and make far, far less than, a 16% pay cut below the people you work with. Or you can be discriminated at work and make much, much more. You can make equal and still feel as though the experience of sexism is holding your career back, making your life miserable. Often we know having, real tangible mental health, emotional health, physical health effects. And the thing is, the more you talk about kind of what your experience is, the day-to-day, the cumulative effects, kind of what that has done to your life, the more you're getting not into facts, right? I mean, it's true that these effects have happened to you, but often it's very, very difficult to prove it, right? So the more you're going away from the facts and into the truth. Here's the thing. Some people might argue, right, that by that being truth, it is not going to be as persuasive, or I think some people would say not as important even. I disagree, but I think some people would say that as the facts. The exact opposite is true in Memoir, right? That makes sense. If we wanted to read a book that was just a list of facts, probably get an encyclopedia, maybe we would get some kind of general nonfiction, although usually that's not all facts either, but we would get a different type of book than a memoir. But when you think about that memoir is going to be something that is based not on fact, but on truth, it makes so much more sense, right? This is why our experiences are at the heart of memoir, as opposed to every single thing needing to have, a footnote where we're citing a source. We're sharing our experiences, our truth. They're not provable, but that's not a detriment. They're not provable because they're truth, not facts, right? Now, this is not to say that memoir doesn't have any fact. Of course it does. You are likely going to be sharing, for example, the date or even just the year, right, that you started your new job, or the year that your child was born, or the year you got married. Those are facts, right? Those are provable. We can pull out our marriage certificate, demonstrate what year. It's pretty objective. Most people, in good faith are not going to argue with you on that. But for the most part, your reader is not really all that interested in those things, other than that those things can make the truth much clearer. So for instance, if you are going to write about, you got married in 1982 and then you had your first child 10 years later in 1992. That's a little bit unusual, right? So we might be kind of curious, like, oh, it was kind of a sizable gap between your marriage and your first child. Well, tell me more about that, right? In that case, those facts they present a scaffold, right? So that we can build the truth over them. That is very often the case. But those years, those dates, those facts, those are not the things that your reader is there for. Your reader is there for truth. And remember what I said, facts are really specific. Truth is much more abstract, much more broad. This is the heart of memoir. Most people reading your book did not get married in 1982 and have their first child in 1992. It's improbable, statistically improbable, right? But if you are going to go into the reasons, for example, that you wanted to, have time with your spouse and enjoy each other, and maybe you weren't really sure if you even wanted to have children at all, and you really wanted to give it some thought, now that is truth. And do you see how much more universal that is? Not all universal, not everyone, but how many more people are going to be able to find themselves in that truth than could ever find themselves in that fact, right? We have truth as this kind of umbrella that allows us in memoir. This is the most beautiful, I think the most important piece in memoir, that we can pull people into our umbrella of truth with us and say, hey, I see you. Do you see me? We can build this community of truth where we're all sharing in the same types of experiences, even though we're not sharing in the same literal experiences. So when we put kind of all of these ways of thinking about things together, I want to talk about just a few specific ways that you might think about how facts are going to be incorporated into truth, and whether the facts should really ever call the shots, no, over the truth, or how you can kind of make them come together in harmony. So the thing that I want you to remember is that truth and facts do go together, but with memoir, we are always leaning toward truth, because truth is inclusive and general, versus facts, which again are specific and so by definition tend to be exclusive in your memoir. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is how you might use historical facts to make your memoir much, much richer and more interesting for your reader. So I want to give an example. This is a memoir that I wrote many, many years ago, ghost wrote for a client. And this book is set in Chicago. This is the author's hometown. And she really wanted not only to tell kind of her story of growing up in Chicago and kind of some of the things that she experienced as a child growing up in this particular neighborhood in Chicago, but she also wanted to think about, again, the universal truth. Well, one thing that I think ironically a bit allowed her to really universalize her experience was facts. So what we ended up doing with her book was we dug back into Chicago history. Now, Chicago history is fantastic. It's so interesting. So what we did is, as the years were going through in her memoir, we were looking what was happening in Chicago at that time. So we were looking at news coverage, we were looking at statistics, we were looking at kind of the really big major current events that shaped that city. And what that allowed her to do was then draw parallels, right? So for instance, there was a child, this is a very sad story, a child in Chicago in the 1980s that was kind of recruited by drug dealers and ended up being killed at a very, very young age. And this child was just a couple of years older than she was at the time. And when we dug that up, she was like, oh my gosh, that is so powerful, because she at that time, at that age, she was going through some really, really difficult things. And there was part of her that said, like, could that have been me? Guarantee, if you are thinking that, other people will be thinking that too. And that is what makes a fact, like this sweet child's death, tragic death at that age, into a truth that is something other people can gather with you underneath this umbrella of truth and find themselves in your story. So this can be a really, really effective way to do that. It doesn't necessarily just need to be places and dates. You can also think about pulling in things like statistics. Are you writing a workplace sexism story where bringing some of the details and facts and statistics about workplace sexism can really help people see how your story relates to them? Get it in there, right? The truth is more important than facts, but we are never going to shake our head at facts that can help us prop up and scaffold our truth. So we can pull in all kinds of things that we want to. I also see, by the way, people will bring in, mental health terminology pretty often. I really love that kind of book. Often this is a hybrid memoir where it's as much story as it is, different types of advice and diagnostic criteria, that kind of thing. But if you're bringing that in, you are bringing in a fact, and it's going to prop up the truth and make it just a little bit broader, a little bit clearer for your reader. We love that. We're always going to do that. But here is where you want to be kind of careful. My next tip. You never ever want to allow a fact to derail your truth. So we will take facts if they're going to help out our truth. We do not want them if they're derailing our truth. Now, lest someone say that I am encouraging you to be dishonest, which I am absolutely not, let me give you an example that I think is going to be helpful. So this is a memoir that I coached many years ago. And this is a person who was writing about race and kind of his experience of growing up Black in LA. One of the things that he had such a vivid memory of was watching a particular basketball game. He was a really big basketball fan, still is. Watching this particular basketball game on TV as the news cut in with that very famous O.J. Simpson Bronco chase, if you remember this. So this is 1994. And so he was, kind of remembering, and he was saying like, well, I remember it was this team, and it was, I was watching it on this station and it was at this time, etc. Well, we were just kind of fact checking and looking and kind of making sure that all of the things that he had written, would hold up and that they were really as rich as they could be. We're looking to see if we could find some additional things, prop up that truth a little bit more. And the thing that we discovered actually was that the game that he remembered watching when the OJ car chase cut in, that game was not on that day. So there effectively was no way to reconcile the fact of the date and time of the car chase with the truth of his kind of memory of that car chase cutting in on the news. So what do we do then? In this case, and I will support authors, by the way, in whatever choice you want to make in this type of situation, because it is your book and it is your truth. In this case, he felt so certain that he was like, you know what? I don't know. I can't tell you how to reconcile this. I don't care. This is what I remember, and it was really, really important. There are some other kind of context things in that particular book. He was like, this is so important to me. I absolutely must make sure I've got to have this detail in here. That's fine. By the way, my guess is no reader has ever noticed that in this book. Readers are usually, they're not interested in facts as much, as I said earlier. They want the truth, so they're not really paying all that much attention to the kind of those very, very specific details. So he left it in. What you also could do is just leave a little bit of that specificity out, right? Remember, we want the broadness. The specificity is much, much more optional. So you could certainly just say you were watching basketball on TV and the car chase cut in. That's fine, right? That is not quite as detailed, but it's just as truthful. It's just as interesting. And you're going to obviously have emotional context around that. That's the thing that people really want to care about. In this example, though, the one thing that I want to really make sure I'm very, very clear on, what you should not do is just cut the memory because you can't figure out how to reconcile it with facts. It is not the facts that matter. It is the truth that matters. So the thing you're really trying to find is what rings true to you, right? What feels true? What matches and aligns with your memory in a way that is not going to, be a glaring contrast with facts, which I doubt your memories are, but that is going to allow you, again, to paint that really broad brush, to really invite other people into your story and make sure that the truth is the thing that your reader is going to come away with. They don't care about the facts. They're not going to remember it anyway. So we are not going to go too far down the rabbit hole of facts. At the same time, I do want to give just a word of caution, just to make sure that, there have been some scandals in history, not that long ago, where memoirists were really called to the mat for exaggerating and stretching things. Do not think that that is what I am telling you to do. You should not do that. If you are marketing a memoir as a memoir, you are certifying that it is non-fiction. So what do I mean by that? Because I just literally said, if you remember the basketball game happening at the O.J. Simpson, that's fine, keep them both in. That is a trivial matter. Here is what you should not ever do is look at your timeline and say, this would have been so much better if, my parents had just gotten divorced 2 years earlier, then I could make this. Do not do that, of course. But here's the thing. That is neither facts nor truth. That is a manipulation of your reader, right? That is a manipulation of what really happened that is intentional on your part, that you are doing for a very particular marketing reason. That is never okay. I don't condone that, and that is that can cause you a lot of issues. So I would never, ever, ever encourage you to do that. Now, if you feel like, gosh, this span of my parents getting divorced was so long and it's just going to be really boring, we're just going to kind of skim over it really quick. That's your truth. That's fine, right? Because you're not changing the dates. The problem is if we know that the facts don't match up with the story we want to tell, and so we change the facts and change the truth. We're not going to do that. It's not a good idea. I don't think any of you were going to do that. Just, I don't want this video out on the internet, people saying like, that Amanda Edgar lady said I could just lie in my memoir. No, let's not do that. What I do want you to remember though, what I started with this video with, the truth is always going to be more important than the facts. When in doubt, lean toward the truth. Make sure that you are doing so honestly, that you are actually inviting your reader into a very authentic, genuine conversation, and then lead toward the truth. The facts, they will fall into place. You can pull more in if you want to, but that should never, ever be the guiding factor of how you are writing your memoir. Remember, the purpose of a memoir is to tell your truth and invite other people into that umbrella with you so that they can get the benefit of all of your hard-fought wisdom and lived experiences. Okay, well, I hope this has been helpful to you. If you have been struggling with how to think about all of these many, many, many components that are going into the ways that you are trying to move forward, please reach out. I would love to work with you one-on-one. If you'd like to just hand off your book, we offer full ghostwriting services. We also can coach you. And if you're a woman, watch for the next opening of the Memoir Method. You can go ahead and get on the wait list now if you head over to pageandpodium.com/apply. If you'd like to work with us in any other way, just check out our website. We've got all of our services listed there. You can get in touch. Let us know what you're needing. We'll be happy to help support you. For now, I hope that this excavation of the truth has been really, really rewarding and inspiring to you. And I hope that your memoir is going exactly the way you hoped, giving you exactly the clarity and healing that you need. And I hope that your writing goes well. I'll talk to you soon.
Writing your memoir can be one of the most rewarding, fulfilling, beneficial tasks that you can take on in this lifetime. But unfortunately, it can also be kind of a slog, especially if you don't know how to plan your time. And that is why my team has put together an absolutely free resource called the Memoir Method Checklist. This checklist is going to take you through every single step you need from that very first seed of an idea all the way through publishing that book and holding it in your hands. We're going to give you the steps, we're going to give you the timeline, and we are going to make sure that you always know where you're going, even a step before you get there. You can download this resource for free at pageandpodium.com/checklist. And once you do, let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you, hear about your book, and hear about how your writing is going.